Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be all about different uncaught serial killers. I think this is a super interesting topic because obviously the fact that there are active serial killers that are still out there and have not been found is fucking terrifying. So let's get into it. The first serial killer I want to talk about is the alphabet killer. So the alphabet killer is one of the most puzzling cases that I have ever come across. I've never understood exactly if this case is all connected. I think there's no doubt about it in my mind, but it also kind of doesn't make sense. We're gonna get into it, so let's start at the beginning. So the first instance where this serial killer came about was when a 10-year-old girl named Carmen Colon went missing November 16th of 1971. Carmen disappeared while she was running a routine errand of picking up her prescription medication for her grandmother. After leaving the pharmacy, Carmen was spotted getting into a car near Rochester's Bullheads district. There were several witnesses that came out later, which makes no sense to me, claiming that they saw Carmen running down the side of Interstate 490 in Rochester, New York in a frantic state and waving her arms for help. But nobody reported this, which is pretty insane if you ask me. I don't understand how the hell no one reported that until days later. According to the reports that occurred again days after this happened, and no one tried to intervene to help this girl, a 10-year-old girl screaming for help, and nobody did anything, is pretty preposterous in my opinion. Nonetheless, according to witnesses, she was seemingly trying to escape the car that she had been in. And again, despite the unusual sight, nobody intervened. Carmen was reported missing, and sadly, just 2 days later, she was found off of a road near Churchville, New York, and that was a rural area outside of Rochester. And Carmen had been SA'd and strangled, and there were very clear signs that she tried to fight back against her attacker, which is just horribly sad. At first, it was thought of as a coincidence that her name was Carmen Colon, two C's obviously, and then there was another coincidence that she was found in Churchville, also starting with a C. Later, some connections started to occur, so obviously this happened in November of 1971. We're gonna fast forward to April 2nd of 1973, when the second alphabet murder victim went missing. Her name was Wanda Walkowitz. So Wanda had gone missing on April 2nd as she was walking home from a grocery store, again in Rochester, New York. On the day of her abduction, witnesses reported seeing her struggling to carry a bag of groceries near her home on Conkey Avenue. A man in a car was seen stopping her to offer her a ride, which she appeared to accept because she got in the car and then was never seen again. A day later, in a town called Webster, Wanda's body was found, and just like Carmen, she had been SA'd and strangled. This was when police started to link these cases together because it was weird that two little girls with double letter names went missing from Rochester, New York, and then were found in a town with the same letter as their name. And then on November 26th of 1973, about 2 years after the death of Carmen Colon, the third victim, Michelle Mainza, was abducted on November 26th of 1973 while she was walking home from school. She was last seen getting into the car of an unidentified man near Webster Avenue in Rochester. Witnesses were called seeing Michelle looking frightened and sitting in the front seat of this car. Just 2 days later, Michelle's body was discovered in Macedon, another town beginning with the same letter as her initials. And again, she had been SA'd and strangled. Because her case had such striking similarities to the other previous alphabet murder cases, this is when people really started to believe that Rochester, New York had a serial killer on their hands. So the Rochester police really worked to try to figure out why these cases were connected, how they could be connected, and who could have done it. So of course, all of the victims were young girls, ages 10 to 11. All of the girls had their first and last names starting with the same letter, and then their bodies were all found in a town that was set with the same letter as their initials. So obviously, like, this is just no way a coincidence, although some people believe that it is, which is preposterous in my opinion. Like, clearly not a coincidence. There have been quite a few suspects over the years, but ultimately, obviously, this is an uncaught serial killer, so it's unsolved. A man named Miguel Colon, who is the uncle of Carmen Colon, became the first suspect of this case early in the investigation. So Miguel owned a car similar to the one that witnesses described seeing near the scene of Carmen's disappearance. And there were allegedly reports that Miguel was trying to like flee the country and did flee the country to Puerto Rico because he had done something bad after Carmen's death. Miguel's connection to the case intensified suspicion, obviously, but ultimately he was never formally charged. And when he returned home from Puerto Rico, he actually opted to take a polygraph test and passed. Law enforcement was unable to find enough evidence to definitively link him to any of the murders, so therefore he was no longer a suspect. A man named Kenneth Bianchi, who was a different serial killer, he was known as one of the infamous Hillside Stranglers who went on a killing spree in Los Angeles. He actually became a suspect when his Rochester roots were discovered, and at the time of the Alphabet murders, he actually was living in Rochester and worked as an ice cream vendor. Investigators explored the possibility that Kenneth was related to these murders, but were ultimately unable to make a direct connection, and he always denied being a part of the Rochester killings. He was said he was not the Alphabet killer, but he was convicted of the Hillside Strangler murders, and he still maintained his innocence about the Alphabet killing, but I don't know. Another suspect was a man named Joseph Nasso, who was another notorious serial killer. He had been linked to the Alphabet murders much later in the investigation because Nasso was convicted in 2011 of murdering 4 women in California, all of whom had, like the victims of the Alphabet murders, this man had murdered people that had the same letter initials. Obviously, that made a connection, and he did live in Rochester in the early 1970s, which put him in the correct area at the time of the killings. However, there was no definitive evidence that linked him to being the Alphabet killer. Although the similarities between his known victims and the Rochester girls obviously continue to raise suspicion, but he ultimately didn't match the DNA. There was DNA found at some of the scenes of the crime, and he didn't match any of this DNA, and neither did Kenneth Bianchi, so they were both ultimately ruled out. But I don't know, Joe Nasso character just feels so like it's strange that he was also doing the alliteration thing. A lot of people think that perhaps these cases are actually not connected and they're just a symptom of copycat theory, which is like where they see one person kill someone, which a lot of people think maybe Carmen's uncle, Miguel Colon, actually did kill her, but that's the only person that he killed. And then the other cases were kind of other people just copying those murders to throw people off, or just some sick weird thing. I don't know. I just do think that it is way too strange. Like, I think they're definitely connected. Whether or not it's because it's done by the same person, I feel that it is definitely intentionally copied, in my opinion. It's just too weird and too specific. This case still to this day remains unsolved, and no one is quite sure what has happened here. In my opinion, I think it makes the most sense that at least the last 2 murders were done by the same person just because of the timeline of it. But maybe Carmen Colon was actually murdered by her uncle. Either way, there is something weird going on here, and it's strange to me that this has never been solved, honestly. Let me know what you guys' theories are on this. Do you think it was all done by the same killer? Is it a serial killer situation? Or was it just people who were murdering these girls and it was coincidental somehow? Let me know your thoughts. The next uncaught serial killer that we're going to be talking about is called the Smiley Face Killer. This is a crazy like conspiracy, really, because it's not as though there is necessarily a serial killer. It's more of the theory that there is one, which will make sense as we go on. There's been a string of different murders, well, deaths, that have been ruled as accidental drowning. There have been signs of potential foul play involved with each of these drownings, where essentially young men around the same age, same height, same build, were found drowned in rivers and lakes after a night out of drinking, and nearby there was always smiley face graffiti where their bodies were found. So let's go into the detail of some of the cases that were linked to this smiley face murder theory. So the first that we're going to be talking about was a boy named Patrick McNeil, who was a 21-year-old student from Fordham University in New York City. On February 16th of 1997, Patrick was last seen leaving a bar on Manhattan's Upper East Side. He was reportedly extremely intoxicated and was seen getting into a car after shortly leaving the bar. His body was found 50 days later in the East River, 12 miles from where he disappeared. There were some strange circumstances regarding his drowning. For one, his body showed signs of being in the water for a much shorter period of time than 50 days. Obviously, that's something that would be able to be seen, and according to a lot of coroners, that just didn't add up with him being there for 50 days. There were also burn marks on his body, which led a lot of people to believe that he had been abducted, tortured, and then dumped into the river. And of course, a smiley face was found spray painted on a wall nearby where his body was recovered. But ultimately, this was still ruled as an accidental drowning. One of the next cases was in 2002, and it was of a 21-year-old boy named Chris Jenkins, who was a student at the University of Minnesota, and he went missing on Halloween night of 2002. After he was kicked out of a bar in downtown Minneapolis, he was never seen again. 4 months later, his body was found in the Mississippi River. Authorities once again initially ruled this as an accidental drowning while intoxicated, although his family has always claimed that they never accepted this explanation, especially since he had been found with his arms crossed over his chest as if he had been placed in the water and not fallen in. In 2006, his case was actually reopened and his death was ruled a homicide. Police cited new evidence, but they did not elaborate on what that evidence was, and no arrests have been made. And of course, again, a smiley face was also found graffitied near where his body was recovered. Another instance brings us all the way to 2017. A man named Dakota James was 23 years old and he was a grad student in Pittsburgh. He disappeared on January 25th of 2017 after a night out of drinking with his friends, and his body was found 40 days later in the Ohio River. There was a lot of unusual circumstances regarding Dakota's case. He was seen walking near the Roberto Clemente Bridge shortly before his disappearance, and authorities suggested that he fell into the river while intoxicated. However, his family and some investigators actually believe there was foul play involved. His family had their own autopsy done, and there was traces of the date R-word drug found in his system. So he had definitely been drugged that night, and a lot of people think that he didn't accidentally drown. And again, his body was not consistent with something that had been in the water for 40 days. Like, it didn't look like it had been in the water for that long. So there are quite a few theories that there was actually foul play involved. And of course, again, a smiley face was reportedly found graffitied on a bridge nearby where James's body was recovered. Again, there have been dozens of instances that are very, very similar to this of young college-aged boys accidentally drowning in various bodies of water where there is a smiley face found nearby. A lot of people believe that that's a coincidence because apparently smiley faces are common, which is strange to me because I don't think I've literally ever seen a smiley face graffitied, maybe like once in a while, but not really. I wouldn't really say it's like that common. Ultimately, I don't know if I necessarily think that this is all done by the same person, but maybe it's like a part of some like weird cult or something strange, like an organized group of sorts. And there's a lot of theories that kind of go along with that. So two really experienced detectives named Kevin Gannon and Anthony DeRate both were really interested in a lot of these cases after investigating the 1997 death of Patrick McNeil in New York City. And over the years, they found similarities in dozens of cases across multiple states that had been ruled as accidental drownings, but had a lot of weird suspicions around them. Detectives really did believe that these young men were not drowning by accident, but were actually abducted, murdered, and then dumped into the body of water. This theory really started to gain more traction in the mid-2000s, largely due to the amount of cases that kept popping up with very similar profiles. These investigators do believe that this could have been an organized group. Like I said, the smiley face killers could be a part of like an organized crime type of group across multiple states, abducting young men and murdering them and disposing their bodies in water to hide the fact that this happened. Theory suggests that many of the victims may have been drugged with substances like the date R-word drug before being abducted, which would explain how so many young, strong, athletic men were unable to defend themselves or escape. Many detectives believe that the smiley face graffiti is just too strange to be a coincidence, and the fact that they were found around so many of these crime scenes is just unlikely to be coincidental. The FBI, however, has consistently dismissed the idea of the smiley face killer and stated that there was no conclusive evidence to corroborate the fact that there was a serial killer on the loose that was doing all of these crimes and leaving the smiley face on purpose. And basically, they kind of just said, these are all accidental drownings and unrelated. But a lot of people disagree with that. And like I said, including these two investigators who have been doing this for many, many years of their life, they believe that it's connected. And I kind of agree. But let me know your guys' thoughts. In my opinion, I just feel like the profiles of the men who were found were too similar. The smiley faces was weird. The fact that they all drowned was weird, and they were all seen like having a night out before. I don't know. A lot of it just doesn't add up in my opinion, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts on it. But either way, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below if there's any other uncaught serial killers that you want me to talk about. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.